In this video, I'm going to be talking about position roles. Normally, I would go down the tabs and in some type of order, which we'll get back to in subsequent videos. But this particular aspect of the game actually has tentacles that reach out into other areas of the game. So in order to better understand those areas and understand what you're seeing when we get to those areas, I wanted to bring into play position roles because they are basically spread throughout the game. And you can find position roles in your coaching tab down at the bottom or over to the far right, either one. In D3, this is an aspect of the game you didn't have available to you. You had the default setting based on the What If Sports standards, where they decided to put emphasis, if you will, on certain cores. These values that you see must equal 100 for each row. We're looking at the quarterback position, and in the quarterback position, you've got 2 additional spots that you didn't have at D3, and that is a position for a rushing quarterback and a position for quarterback user 1. Now, that is just the naming structure or naming architecture that is in place by What If Sports. You can't change the names of those particular positions. However, just because the name says quarterback rushing does not mean that that has to be your rushing quarterback position when it comes to the depth chart. And we'll get into exactly what I mean by that later on. But the basic understanding and thing you need to recognize is just because a position says something here as a sub position, like we have here with quarterback, the sub position would be rushing, the other one being user 1. You can design that position and tailor it based on the values that you place on each of these cores. For instance, let's say that contrary to what it says, rushing quarterback, you wanted this particular quarterback to do nothing but throw the ball. Well, in that case, you don't necessarily want a high value for speed. You want to put a little more emphasis on his strength, the game instinct, his technique, maybe elusiveness to avoid some of those sacks, definitely athleticism as well. What you really don't need, and the way you edit these is click the pencil edit attribute, what you really don't need is any value in durability, because the game no longer has injuries. That was an important aspect a decade or more ago when the game did have injuries and your players could get hurt. To kind of help your stud stay in playing condition, you would put some value on the durability aspect. So just know that there should never be a number here. You are wasting opportunity. As these category headers go, athleticism, speed, durability, work ethic, stamina, strength, blocking, tackling, hands, instinct, that's your game instinct, your elusiveness and technique, and then your total number. This is not the player's total number. This is the total number of value points you're assigning to each of these categories. And again, this must equal 100 when you're done. Let's say that, as I mentioned, we want to make this guy a throwing quarterback. We don't necessarily worry about speed. We simply knock the speed down to, let's say, 10. His strength is at 20. Elusiveness is 18. We want him to be a little bit smarter, or work on him becoming smarter than becoming elusive. So for this guy's benefit, I'm going to make him an 18. I'm going to knock his elusiveness down to 16. But I want him to have some good technique in throwing the ball. So now we're at 93, which means that we have a blessing because we can add some more value. Let's say we want to beef up his athleticism. We go to 14. Once you click out of that box, the value to the right changes, so you've got an understanding of where you are and how much you've got left to allocate. Let's take this game instinct to 19, his technique to 19, and let's beef up his strength to 22. Now we're at 100. Okay, let's say that we want to make user number 1 our running quarterback, just for sake of argument. That's where we would jack up the speed. Let's say we want the speed to be 25. His elusiveness, we want to make it 25. Definitely got some good technique. We'll leave it around 20. Don't necessarily need him to be too smart running the ball, so we're going to knock that down to 20. And his athleticism, we definitely want him to be athletic, so we want to see that at 14. We're happy with those numbers, but if we look to the right, that's 129. We have 29 points over our allowed limit, which is that 100. So we need to start decreasing these numbers. Let's drop this by 2. Let's drop that by 2, and we'll drop that by 2, and then drop this by 2. Let's see. I went up somewhere, didn't I? So that didn't help us. I went up somewhere. Let's try this. As you can see, you can play with these numbers to get them down to where you want them based on your preference, basically, and you'll gain some of the understanding of how these affect the other portions of the game as we go into those videos. Still over 12. So we're going to have to make some major cuts on this guy. See where our issues are. Oh, let's make him down to 10 here. And the strength for a running back, we really don't need him all that strong necessarily. So I'm happy with those numbers. So is the game. It shows 100. Now we hit save. Now bear in mind, these are just arbitrary numbers. I'm throwing them out there. Again, you can set these up to be whatever you want based on where you want to emphasize the importance for that particular position. So that was the quarterback. Now we'll get into a little bit more of what these numbers affect later on. Running back, you'll see a few more options to you. You've got a running back, you've got a fullback, the speed running back, the power running back, and possession running back, and again there's that user 1. So you can make your fullback your speed running back, and your power back your possession back. You can change the values for that position to make that particular player fit that style or that category based on those values. But why confuse yourself? Get as close to these names for these particular positions, these sub positions as I call them, as possible. Let's click that pencil again for the edit. Fullback, definitely want him to be strong, be a good blocker. Technique is a little bit low, athleticism is a bit low. This 30 number, I try not to go over about 25 if I can help it. So let's knock this down to 30, blocking down to 27, and let's get his technique up. We want his technique at about 14 just for giggles here, and then we'll boost his athleticism. We'll boost that up as well. Now we're showing that the fullback, we really don't care about his speed. We really don't want to emphasize his speed. Well, I want him to at least be able to get out of his stance mentally. That's kind of what I'm thinking. So what if we knock this down to 25 and add a couple over here for him? Let's add 3, 4, let's make it 5. And then again, there's that durability. We don't care about that. For me, work ethic, I don't care about too much about his work ethic. That's going to come with playing time, and that's another video. So I generally leave a 0 there. Stamina, again, that's going to depend on how long you want the player in the game. Now, don't confuse that with the substitution rate that we saw in the previous video. This is talking about increasing his stamina to get him into the position of being in the game the longest. Now, having a high number here does not necessarily increase his stamina as a person, and I misspoke. It indicates that that's where you have emphasis. You want the player in this position who has a lot of stamina. So you're going to make that value higher. when we're dealing with practice plan, which will be another video, that's when those numbers will actually indicate where they're going to improve. So apologies for misspeaking on that one, but these numbers indicate where you're putting emphasis based on what you expect to see from those players. So now he's at 98, which means we have 2 more. I don't care about his stamina, so now that's going to make 5 more that we can allocate somewhere. And I'm going to bump his speed up to 10. I want him a little bit faster, even though he is a fullback. So that would be a setting for your fullback. Possession, let's say we want him to be, we're concerned about his athleticism for about a 10 value. We want him to have some speed, definitely some elusiveness, some good technique to catch the ball. So we're going to kind of emphasize that a little bit more. We want him to be a pretty smart player. Don't necessarily want him to be strong if he's going out for catching. We want more in the hands category, so I would knock that down. Let's just say 15, and then we can bump up his hands. We definitely want him to have some good hands, so we're going to put an emphasis or a value of about 15 there. We don't want somebody who's got low hand rating, and that's what would show up when we're looking at our roster or our player rating page, which we'll show in another video. So now we're at 115, so we're 15 over. So let's take about 4 or 5 off of this, drop it down to 18 here as well. We'll go 17. We'll knock that down to 10. There's that stamina again. Let's go with a 0 there, a 0 there, and a 0 there. Now we've got 1 that we can allocate, and we're going to throw it on the technique. So anyway, now we've got a possession running back setup. So that's just a quick little overview of how you set position roles. And in the subsequent video, we're going to get into how those are important.